So over the past 20 years, Canada became the second choice destination for immigrants coming from the Caribbean, overtaking the United Kingdom, which held that position since the 1960s. Now in 2024, Caribbean nationals are among the 35% of immigrants to Canada who are choosing to return back home to the Caribbean. Why is that happening in 2024? Let's talk about it.
Join in.
A record number of new permanent residents were added to Canada's population last year, 431,645. But the big question is how many are here to stay.
So-called onward migration, that's immigrants who come and then leave, has been creeping up silently for decades, and it's gone pretty unnoticed.
A new report titled The Leaky Bucket finds the number of immigrants leaving Canada surged between 2017 and 2019 and has yet to stabilize.
We're talking about spikes of 30 to 40% above the normal historical average of what you might expect.
The reasons are not surprising. Everything from housing affordability and inflation to healthcare challenges and fair credential recognition.
When they come to Canada, if there are speed bumps along the way for foreign credential recognition, that's definitely presenting some challenges for those professionals to stay.
I am pleased to introduce the International Credential Recognition Act.
Late last month, the provincial government took steps to address this, introducing legislation that would require regulatory bodies to remove unfair barriers in 29 professions.
From veterinarians and paramedics to social workers and engineers and teachers.
But the rules won't go into effect until this summer, and advocates say it's only one piece of the puzzle.
I think there's lots more we can do. Like, for example, even creating that welcoming community for everyone.
According to the Global Talent Competitive Index, Canada fell from 9th place in 2016 to 15th, scoring poorly on immigration retention. And experts say, given the labor shortage right across the country, Canada could stand to benefit from a bit of humility.
So as stated, Caribbean nationals are among the 35% of Canadian citizens who are choosing to return back to their native land, back to the warm Caribbean. And in this video, I'm going to break down 5 main reasons why people are choosing to go back to the Caribbean and to leave this beautiful, once prosperous place that they call home in Canada. So let's do it. So the first thing I would have to say is rent, mortgage, the cost of a roof over your head. Let me give you an example. So I came to Canada, officially moved to Canada in 2011. My first apartment in Canada was $750. That was 2011. And now, 2024, heading into 2025, that same apartment that is, 14 years older, that apartment is now $2,100. Just imagine that, from $750 to $2,100. So the cost just to have a roof over your head is pretty much gone up by about 200%. And it's right across the board in every province, in every city, anywhere you go in Canada. Rent and mortgage is just way more expensive than it used to be 10, 15 years ago. So that is the number one reason why there are more people from the Caribbean and from other places across the world that came to Canada for a better life, and now they're choosing to go back to their native land because the homelessness crisis in Canada is like, I think the only place with a bigger problem in terms of housing and homelessness is America. So America number 1, Canada number 2. So housing, that is the number one reason why most Canadian citizens that came from the Caribbean, they're choosing to go back to the Caribbean. That is number 1. Number 2, the cost of grocery. Like, I know since the pandemic, everywhere in North America and particular and the Caribbean, everyone is crying. So in Canada, like we have experienced pretty much like a 100% increase on everyday grocery that you put on your dinner table. And that has happened like in the past, I would say 5 to 6 years since 2019. So for example, like a 8-kilo bag of rice, I used to pay like $8, $9. And if it goes on sale back then, you'd get it for $7.50 or right in that ballpark. Now, that same 8-kilo bag of rice, you're paying like $19 and $20. So that is like 100% increase. So not only is it more difficult to pay for your rent and your mortgage, but to add to that, going to the supermarket, the average monthly grocery bill in Canada is $1,400 Canadian dollars. 1,400 Canadian dollars per month for the average grocery. 6 years ago, that would have been $800. So that is number two. It is very expensive to feed your family. It's very expensive to put food on the table. So that is why a lot of people are choosing to go back to the Caribbean, because at least you can plant some breadfruit, you can plant some yam, some banana. In Canada, you can't do that. You either have to go to the food bank or you just starve to death. So, that is why up to 35%, including Caribbean people, are choosing to go back home. That is number two. And number three, and this is in particular for Caribbean nationals. A lot of Caribbean nationals are not comfortable with sex education in the school. Canada has gone crazy in terms of sex education and what they're trying to teach our kids in school. And over the past, I would say 6 or so years, there's a lot of people pulling their kids from the government school, putting them into private school or homeschooling. So that is number three. Like, people are very paranoid about what is going on in the school system and what is being taught to our kids as low as like 7, 8 years old, the type of stuff that they're teaching kids in school. And the government is so forceful with it, is that even the government refused to fund daycare. They refuse to fund any private school if they are not allowed to put their type of sex education in those schools. And a lot of people are just not having it. So a lot of people choose to just go back to the Caribbean, where they can raise their kids and give their kids the same level of education that they receive back home in the Caribbean. So I would say that is number three. People are scared of what people are calling indoctrination and the type of sex education that's being taught to our kids in school. So that's number three. Okay, so number four, the fourth reason why a lot of people are leaving Canada, going back to the Caribbean, is because it is cold. Canada is a cold country. Toronto is not as cold as some other parts of Canada, but Canada is very cold. And one of the things with all of the things that I listed earlier, so the cold in Canada, it's people come to Canada and it's a sacrifice you make living in a cold country, and you try to live a better life. So when everything else is not going right, in terms of like when it's expensive to rent or to pay a mortgage, when grocery is getting extremely expensive, then the temperature, the cold then become unbearable, because a lot of people will sacrifice and they're living a good life. They have a nice car, have a nice house, and you know they will be able to deal with the cold because of the other stuff that is going right in their life. But the day that everything else is going wrong, the cold becomes so unbearable. So that is number four. A lot of people are moving back to the Caribbean because Canada is too cold. If you are going to struggle to pay rent, if you're going to struggle to buy grocery, might as well do it in the tropics than in the cold. So that is number four. So finally, number five, credential recognition. I think this one has got to be the more frustrating one for a lot of immigrants to Canada, is that for the most part, in order to come to Canada, Canada has what they call like a skilled worker program where you get to apply to come to Canada to be a permanent resident. And in doing so, Canada looks for the best of the best, the most educated people from all over the world. So you have doctors, you have nurses, you have lawyers, you have teachers coming from all over the world to Canada with their credential. But the frustrating part is when you get to Canada with those credentials, it is like zero. Like you're starting from ground zero. Unlike America and the UK, when you go with your credential, you just have to do some exam and to transfer some of your university transcript and stuff like that. In Canada, you have to go back to university. So there are a lot of doctors in Canada that are driving taxis. There are a lot of accountants that are driving Uber. There are a lot of people that are working at Home Depot that came from in the Caribbean where they had good jobs, but now coming to Canada, you have to start over and go back to university. And that has been one of the more frustrating part of migrating to Canada for the past 20 years. And every year the government talk about fixing it and still nothing. So a lot of people, it just become frustrated from leaving wherever they're from, leaving the Caribbean as a principal, a teacher, and come to Canada and you cannot apply your trade within the education system. Or if you are a doctor or a nurse, the hoops that you have to jump through to be able to practice what you studied so long in the Caribbean for, it is just crazy. So that is number 5. And I think for most people that decided to go back to the Caribbean, I think that they would point out that as the most frustrating one, reason why they're like, you know what, Canada is not going to do it for me. So guys, if you were ever living in Canada and you went back to the Caribbean, or if you're still living in Canada and you're one of those Canadians that are frustrated and you're like, you know what, why am I here? Why don't I go back to Jamaica or St. Vincent or Barbados, Grenada, wherever in the Caribbean? Sound off in the comment section and let me know if I left anything off this list that you think could be added to the list. Add it to the list and let me know in the comment section. And guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. And remember, peace. I'm out.